Hi there, my name is Philip Ideson. I want to welcome you to the Art of Procurement podcast, the podcast that helps you, a forward-thinking procurement professional, position yourself and your team to proactively take advantage of the revolution that's taking place in procurement today. By interviewing industry trailblazers and sharing insights from our own experiences, my team and I pull back the curtain and shine a light on the strategies, tactics, and tools that procurement teams are using to elevate their impact. And today on the show, I welcome back a returning guest, my good friend Mark Holyoake. Mark is Managing Director of Holyoake Search, a professional recruitment firm dedicated to the procurement function. Now, Mark definitely has his finger on the pulse of the procurement hiring market, particularly here in the US. And I like to check in periodically to learn more about the health of the market. So, let's go straight into the conversation. And I start by asking Mark, what is the state of the hiring market right now?
Yeah, great question. And honestly, it's the one that I guess asked the most on a week-to-week basis. So to go back a little, the procurement job market has experienced significant fluctuations in the last few years, and that's pretty consistent with the messaging from the last time we did this pod 12 months ago. We talked about the market being a bit of a roller coaster, and I think that that persists, honestly. So following some pretty robust hiring activity in 2021 and 2022, largely driven by a lot of post-COVID recovery efforts and companies' efforts to strengthen their procurement teams at a time when procurement had been really thrust into the spotlight. Last year has definitely seen a downturn marked by a lot more economic uncertainty and cost-saving measures, right? And you could see that the level of hiring from the prior 2 years wasn't sustainable for, well, a variety of reasons, not the least of which was the extent to which this activity was driving salaries up and up and up to a point where, frankly, a lot of companies were starting to get a bit resentful about what they were having to pay to bring anyone in the door. But honestly, I think the downturn did actually underscore some level of vulnerability amongst procurement roles that I hadn't seen before and that we weren't necessarily expecting. But it's been traditionally regarded as an essential function. It's been, or at least it's felt, largely protected from the ups and downs of the market in the past. But procurement teams, at least from my perspective, they found themselves subject to far deeper cuts and cuts that went on for longer than I would have anticipated. Now, all that being said, like your question about how does hiring look today, I think there is a real sense of optimism, and the market is gradually rebounding, and that really started in earnest about a month ago, from what I could see. Right, every measure that I look at, from the nature of the calls that I'm having with companies to the calls that we're getting to formally engage with companies on their search efforts, to the volume of jobs that we're seeing advertised online, like hiring volume is on the rise. And that for now feels like it's more at the manager level. So I think that's soon going to give way to more leadership openings and more confidence amongst companies to make bigger investments in hiring senior leaders who will then subsequently, probably want to spend some money in turning over or upskilling a team. And all of that signals, in my mind, a shift towards recovery. And I think that's fueled by renewed economic confidence. I think it's pent-up demand that has built up during the hiring slowdown that's now finding an outlet. And I think to some extent it's also, the start of a retirement wave that we're starting to see amongst more seasoned procurement professionals. It's creating some natural vacancies underneath that need to be filled as well. In terms of the future, maybe the next 6 months or so, I think we'd expect to see that upward trend, right? The statistics would back this up. So I think the most recent Deloitte survey stated that 60% of procurement leaders that they interviewed plan to increase their teams in 2024. So that's telling. And I think that businesses are prioritizing growth, they're prioritizing innovation. The role of procurement will become ever more strategic, and I think that's going to translate into more and more opportunities for procurement professionals to take on roles and drive some really meaningful, impactful change.
Yeah, it's encouraging to hear that you're getting signals now just over the last month or so of recovery, and you mentioned something about salaries. I remember you mentioned it right then. I think it was a couple of years ago when we spoke. It was all about salaries almost getting out of control. Have they normalized now, given the roller coaster that the market has been on since then? So are you finding it back to offers in line of what you would ordinarily expect, or did those high offers a couple of years ago create a new baseline?
So I think part of the inflationary pressure that we saw in salaries, or part of the reason that salaries were going up in the past, was honestly because they had been stagnant for years and years, and procurement has long become this more strategic function, and then that hadn't been met with a corresponding increase in salaries, for a lot of folks in the profession, and so that was long overdue. And so the confidence that we were seeing within procurement recruitment was driving those salaries up to levels, at least initially, that I think they should have been at for some time.
Yeah,
and that was a really positive thing. And then, of course, the supply demand inequity, right, kind of kicks in, and all of a sudden there are many companies in 2022 looking for talent, and very few people or good people left in the market to move. And so those that are looking, they have the opportunity to command, whatever they want, or hold out for whatever kind of offer they think is reasonable, and that started getting out of hand, and that wasn't sustainable. So fast forward to today, I think on average, we haven't gone back to square one, which is great, right? That would have been a huge shame, right? I think we are back at a point where salaries are largely in line with market and where they should be. I think for right now, that's still about 10 to 15% down on some of the higher salaries that we were seeing negotiated toward the end of 2022, before the market kind of dropped off. And I think that's okay, right? I think if people look objectively at those numbers, they should feel good about the fact that they are being paid competitively and appropriately, right? I think if they try to compare that to 12 or 18 months before, I think that's the wrong comparison to make. I think they're just bound to be disappointed by that. But I think that's probably not really a fair comparison, honestly. Right now, though, what's interesting is we're in this sort of no man's land, in the sense that companies are still convinced that the market hasn't changed, and they're the only ones, or they're still one of only a few companies that are hiring, and they feel like they're largely in control of the process, and they have the ability to offer salaries that they feel are appropriate, right? Even if they are a little under market, because frankly, that's what they've been doing the last 12 months. And the individuals that they're trying to hire, with the exception of people who are really active because perhaps they're out of a job, right? These are people that are still somewhat passive in their search, and perhaps these are even people that last negotiated their salary back in 2021 or 2022, who are still convinced that they have the power that they did back then to negotiate exceedingly aggressive packages. And so there is a bit of a disconnect that exists right now, and that'll flush out as the market continues to improve. I think we'll find balance, and I think we'll find some much healthier market conditions for recruitment to take place in. But for right now, we're still seeing a little bit of a disconnect between company expectations and what they're prepared to do, and individual candidate expectations and what they're prepared to accept. But again, my hope is that that's a short-term issue, and it's indicative of any kind of market that is coming out of a trough and it is heading back upwards again, I think.
Yeah, it's especially interesting if everyone, you talk about the demand is quickly changing. If everyone's going into the market at the same time again, from a company recruitment perspective, then they may believe that they're early to the market, early to the trend, but everyone's doing it at the same time. So it creates the demand, or the supply-demand imbalance they may not be aware of. I did have a follow-up on, those salaries that you said were negotiated in 21, 22. Did that, as we went through a little downturn then in 23, did those high salaries make people more vulnerable to the downturn, or did you not necessarily see a direct correlation?
I mean, I have to believe that they did in some cases, right? You were bringing individuals in whom were earning far, far more than their peers, who were already on those teams, and I think that in a down economy, I think that does put a target on your back. And it isn't to say that these people, weren't very high performing, high potential people, and that they weren't, frankly, delivering a return on investment that far, far exceeded what they were being paid, right? It's not to say any of that. It's just to say that in practical terms, when a company is looking at its headcount as a potential target for cost reductions, the individuals whom came in most recently and are earning, I don't know, 30% more than their peers in the department, it's difficult to believe that they wouldn't, have a target on their back, especially when you have a growing contingent of outsourcing firms within the procurement space, or efforts amongst companies to move their offices to lower cost locations. It's difficult to believe that wouldn't impact some of these folks in a way that it might not have if they hadn't come in at such a high salary level. But it's an imperfect system, right? I think it's because there are some people that have gone in at very high levels and have absolutely outperformed, versus any sort of expectations on them, and they are gainfully employed, and they're having a fantastic time of it, and their companies, relish their contribution. And procurement has taken on a whole new sort of role within those companies, and it's largely, a success that you can put at the feet of some of these people that they hired over the last couple years. So it's difficult to paint everybody with the same brush, but yeah, to answer your question, I think that had to have had an effect.
So for folks who are looking for a procurement job today, that maybe they're already employed, they're looking for the next step, or maybe they've been impacted by some of the layoffs in the procurement space, what's most frustrating those folks about the process of finding a job today?
Yeah, they're facing numerous challenges, whether you're actively looking for a role because you're out of a job, or because you're very nervous about your current job, or whether you're just a passive job seeker that's sort of open-minded to being approached once in a while. In speaking with these folks, the biggest frustration actually isn't coming second or third in a bunch of interview processes. People can handle that, right? I think they are understanding of the fact that they may not be the best fit for every single job out there, much as they would like to think they are. They admit that companies have a target skill set in mind, and with a lot of people looking, sure, that may be there and it may not. What is causing the most frustration is a complete lack of response from most
Mhm.
companies to any and all applications. So these people aren't even getting an at-bat, right? They are incredibly well qualified and they're hearing nothing. And it's happening over and over again because the sheer volume of applicants and the resource constraints within hiring teams is resulting in delayed or non-existent communication, and it's leaving candidates in limbo and disheartened and frankly put off by the lack of feedback. And it's being compounded by the fact that a lot of companies just simply haven't adjusted their recruitment practices again to meet the needs of the market now that it's turned again, right? They've become really comfortable with the idea that they're back in control of the interview process,
Mhm.
that they have all this unlimited choice over who they hire. And if they were recruiting in the middle of 2023, they probably did, but things have changed. And so a lot of poor processes and poor behaviors are starting to creep back in, and ultimately it's driving frustration amongst job seekers because they're just not hearing anything.
Is that more so than it's because I know that's always been, an argument or a frustration of a job seeker, but are you finding that to be even more of a acuter problem than it's been before?
Well, listen, there are some companies that are doing a very good job of, of finding and engaging with high performing procurement talent, right? They're investing in their employer branding efforts, and they're promoting diversity and inclusion, and they are providing competitive comp and flexible benefits
Mhm.
packages, and they're working really, really hard to streamline the recruitment process and enhance the overall applicant experience. But the vast majority are not. And I
Yeah.
think that any efforts that they took again in 2021 and 2022 when they had to, because it was an incredibly competitive market for really good people, right? And it demanded that companies try harder than they had in the past to put together an interview process that would actually attract and retain the best people. A lot of these companies have just gone back to their old ways because, again, they can. And so that, coupled with the sheer volume of responses, I think has made the problem as bad, if not worse, than it has
Mhm.
been in the past. Right? Because the likes of LinkedIn, right, they make the process of applying to jobs online quick,
Yeah.
convenient, and
Yeah.
that's great. But it's so easy. There's no barrier to entry, right? I can
Mhm.
put an application in 30 seconds or less. Or heck, I can go pay a bot to put 100 applications in a day for me, right? And so these are incredibly competitive processes, and the sheer volume of responses just makes it tough for HR
Yeah.
departments to process. And of course, the applicant tracking systems that they're using, right? You can understand why they're using them. They have to um, build some technology around that, but it just leaves candidates feeling like their applications are disappearing into
Yeah.
a black hole, right? And AI powered screening tools, they're here, they're getting better, and they're not going anywhere. But we often see qualified candidates being overlooked if their resumes don't perfectly match keywords. And I've
Mhm.
talked for a long time now about the importance of companies considering individuals based upon their overall skill set, right? Not merely whether they're already doing the same exact job elsewhere. But these tools, as good as they can be for some applications, they lack the nuance to understand how the skills and experience that you might gain elsewhere kind of connect to those skills that you would need to predict success within a role in procurement.
It's very interesting because we've talked for a long time about the importance of diversity of thought within a procurement team, and yet I can see how these tools are actually encouraging the opposite. They're encouraging like who exactly matches the profile of the person we're looking for, and the profile that we're looking for is probably looks like from an experience perspective, whoever the people that's already on the team. See,
no question. These tools are good at
right.
If you can feed a job description, right, and the resume of someone who is doing that job, right, into a large language model like ChatGPT, and you basically ask it to kind of rank the suitability of that resume for that role. They're good at doing that, and it can understand that there's a lot of overlap in the experience needed and the experience provided, and so these AI powered screening tools are good at flagging resumes that again look like they were grown in a petri dish for the job at hand, but that's still it's a relatively small pool of potential people that you're fishing from, and two, it's the kind of people that you're now trying to target who have very little incentive to actually move completely sideways into a role that they're already doing elsewhere. And three, like you said, it eliminates a lot of diversity of thought within the department. The department becomes an echo chamber, and people hire in their own image and according to their own sort of biases, even if they're not aware of them. And it really negatively affects performance and company culture. According to every study that you can possibly read on the subject. And so you're right, these tools, as useful as they are for managing high volumes of applications, are kind of feeding into this I think this echo chamber that we're seeing amongst a lot of companies whom are essentially hiring 5-10 of the same person with the same background, with the same linear procurement journey, and paying little attention to individuals whom may have spent some time outside of procurement, who have seen, procurement as an internal customer, right, and who have interacted with groups in a way that helps them understand how procurement fits into the bigger picture.
So given these challenges and frustrations, any tips that you have for job seekers to actually maximize the likelihood of them securing the role that they want?
Yes. So first off, I think the trap that most job seekers fall into is employing this kind of one size fits all approach to their job search. And again, you can understand why. They primarily rely on online job boards and professional networking platforms. And like I said, they're undeniably valuable, they're quick, they're convenient, but they're competitive. And to stand out from the crowd is nigh on impossible. And so you can incorporate these online applications for sure, and there are good roles being advertised on there. Whether they're being advertised well or poorly, maybe that's another part of the discussion. But there are good opportunities there. But you must understand that everyone else is looking in the same place, and so job seekers are going to massively increase the likelihood of securing a role that they want by adopting a more proactive and targeted approach, right? So there's three sort of actionable steps that I'd normally recommend. One is going to be diversifying your search. So expand beyond the online job boards and connect with professional recruiters, and connect and engage with your alumni networks and attend industry events. Right? All of these are going to help you learn about hidden opportunities. So the legitimate opportunities that aren't being made public and will never get made public, because companies will find individuals for those roles long before they are obliged to actually list the role online and deal with a deluge of responses that way. I would encourage people to engage in very proactive outreach. So instead of just sitting there passively waiting for positions, actually approach this, put a sales type hat on, right? And actually do the research on companies that are aligned with your career goals, and then reach out directly to those relevant hiring managers or executives. And I think we always think that those people don't want that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a small contingent of folks that are looking to kind of hand this off entirely to their internal talent acquisition team or to people like me. But honestly, I think most hiring managers, and I think the more senior you go, the more they are open to this. I think a lot of them are quite happy to network professionally with individuals in the business who have taken the time to research their company and make a polite, direct, succinct sort of approach, and just ask about networking opportunity, ask how they can potentially help them, ask if they can keep them in mind for future roles. It just, they are not getting as many of those approaches as you might think, and I think where possible they are happy to help, and they'll tell you if they're not. But I think it's well worth investing some time in doing that. And I guess on a related note, it's investing in personal branding.
Yeah.
Right. It's developing a really robust online presence. It's sharing industry insights and articles and participating in discussions that are going to establish you as a thought leader in the procurement community. Because again, you're going to be then near the top or at the top of some pretty short lists when people are thinking about potential individuals for to hire onto their teams. And not only that, but you're going to go into the interview process with a reputation that precedes you. And there's no better differentiator for a hiring manager who is talking to 3 to 5 people that they've never met before, than if one of those people, is already coming to that interview with this amazing reputation that is shared by a community of the hiring manager's peers within procurement. And again, any advantage that you can give yourself right now to elevate your application above all this noise, I think is to your advantage.
Yeah, I've seen many examples of folks who invest in their own personal brand on LinkedIn. Be present, be thoughtful, and it doesn't mean just pasting random stuff that ChatGPT generated, but really getting involved in conversation. And it doesn't take very long at all of doing that to build up some brand equity from a personal perspective in the procurement space. And what's interesting is then from a hiring manager, and we have this, with people who find the podcast, when people have interacted and engaged, or even just read or heard some of the things you've talked about, they feel on the other side of the table, they're coming into a conversation like they already kind of know you. And that's, and they already have some connection with you in some way, shape or form. And just that little thing can be the difference maker when they're dealing with, when they're interviewing a lot of other people that they've never really seen, heard, or interacted with before.
Oh, 100%. And you don't have to be, amongst the top 10 most, liked or shared people on LinkedIn in order to move the needle. You really don't. It's something small, it's little and often, it's just getting involved in the discussion. And, like anything, right? It's little and often it starts to kind of grow this thing like a mushroom, and the more presence you develop online, the more likely it is you're going to get asked to contribute or speak or moderate at an event. And again, your stock just goes up and up and up. And you've got to look at it as a long-term investment. If it just becomes a means of getting your next job at the point where you're already actively in job search mode, there's limited positive effect. But if you look at this as a long-term exercise and commitment, I think it can make
Yeah.
huge differences. And some of the most successful procurement executives I talk to, they're just naturally they're good at this. They've just kept it up for a long time. And so even against the backdrop of, a market last year that was absolutely down in the dumps, like there were a couple of people I talked to that said, "Oh, sure, I've got 3 or 4 conversations I'm having. Yeah, I'm super interested."
Mhm.
They just never ever found themselves in a situation where they were looking and nobody was calling them back, or nobody was thinking about them. Like where there were very few positions getting recruited for, these folks were on the list for those positions because they had just invested in the network over years and years, and it didn't take a Herculean effort. It just took a little bit, 5, 10, 15 minutes, toward the end of a day,
Yeah.
just paying into your brand and the communication with the community.
Yeah, no better time to start than today, I think, is for sure. So as we start to wrap up the conversation, we often have a conversation around skills and if skills are changing. And I think while we can have lots of predictions and look into our crystal balls, you're really seeing that on the ground every day. You're understanding what companies are looking for. Do you see that the skill sets required are changing, that procurement organizations are looking for from their talent? And how do you see that evolving?
So contrary to maybe popular belief, I think the demand for tech-centric skills in procurement remains relatively low, at
Hmm.
least for now. And most companies are still prioritizing the more traditional procurement competencies that we've seen over the last 5 or 10 years. Of course, there's a vocal group of folks that are talking about um, technology adoption and the future of procurement, and that's a group to be listened to. But
Yeah.
in the main, right, we've not seen recruitment practices change much. Definitely not enough. Over the last 5 to 10 years. So honestly, strong technical skills like negotiations and strategic thinking and supply relationship management, they continue to be highly sought after skills, as well as soft skills, like communication or
Yeah.
collaboration or problem solving. And I think there is a notable shift, if there is any shift at all, toward some more forward looking meta type skills like learning and adaptability and creativity. Um, but I think if we think about um, digital tools and automation solutions becoming more prevalent, and the need for procurement professionals to really enhance their digital literacy and expect that those types of skills are going to be assessed far more comprehensively in the interview process, I still think we're a little ways away from that. I think it's inevitable,
Yeah.
and I think technology's role in procurement is going to continue to evolve. It's going to necessitate changes in the skill sets required, but I don't think that's happening quite yet. So in fact, where we're seeing, and we touched on this a little earlier, but where I see one sort of emerging skill really gaining importance, perhaps even faster than the digital piece, is the ability to, how would I put it, apply procurement principles across more diverse contexts. So
Mhm.
that basically means bringing perspectives from functions other than procurement. because historically, a linear journey within procurement where you went into procurement and you stayed in procurement,
Yeah.
that was what we expected to see. But with procurement becoming a more important and strategic function, we're seeing both high performing procurement people have the opportunities to take on roles outside of procurement, right? Stretch roles. And we're seeing people from outside of procurement looking proactively to come into procurement to make an impact because they see that it's an area of the business that touches a lot of different areas. And so with all of this linear journey, I think is if not going away, then it's maybe not the best route these days because companies are valuing individuals with more diverse experiences and ideas, and they recognize the benefits of those people who understand procurement's role within the wider organization. So I think those people, if they get those opportunities to move or at the very least work extensively with adjacent functions and gain some of those new perspectives, I think that's going to be a distinct advantage to them in the interview process.
It's very interesting because time one it says that we've talked a lot about the softer skills, the relational skills, the business acumen, the connecting procurement with goals of the business, being able to interpret and speak the language of the business, and all those skills are definitely not going away and are probably more valued than the how do I figure out how to build an autonomous sourcing process, for example. But those digital skills the digital literacy is in some organizations I'm sure is valued more than in other organizations, but it's one of those things you invest in now because you're going to need it in the future. Whereas what it sounds like is being needed now is those, the connection, the interpretation, the orchestration of things across your procurement organization. And that's where the value is.
Undoubtedly. Yeah. And I think a really successful procurement executive will really take care to build a team that collectively has all of those skills, right? That addresses immediate needs whilst future proofing the department and making sure that they have the skills needed to embrace a lot of the changes as they come down the pike, as opposed to sort of reacting to those when it's perhaps too late and everybody's then falling over themselves to hire the exact same people at the same time. And I do say to people, right, the professional development piece is important, right? You've got to have the toolkit. But to me, characteristics of an individual that make me eager to recommend them for an interview are not purely rooted in those technical and even soft skills, right? So you've really got to be thinking not just about your professional development, but ultimately how you are able to tell your story and how you are presenting that story and yourself to potential companies, right? So if you have this amazing toolkit, but you can't articulate yourself clearly, right? And you can't tell people not just what you do, but why you do it and how you do it, that's an issue, right? Similarly, if your candidate doesn't have to exhibit this career journey that's the same as everybody else's, but it has to make some sense, right? Even if it's not linear. So you want people to be able to talk about making very deliberate choices, and you want to see a track record of upward mobility and of promotion, right? You want learning orientation, right? You want people to be able to provide some specifics and objective measures of their success, but you also want to talk to people who actually learned something along the way and are demonstrating continuous curiosity. And then you want people with some humility and a positive attitude. And again, a lot of these kind of traits, these skills get left by the wayside when we think about all the things that we need to do and put into practice and work on to increase our stock, right? Not just our ability to do the job well, but ultimately to to be seen to be doing that well in the eyes of the people who are in a position to advocate for us and potentially help us in our careers, right? And so I would encourage people to look really across the board, again, not just at the skills, the technical skills they're developing, but again, how they are able to fundamentally communicate a lot of who they are and what they do and what they're about and what they stand for to other people.
And I think just to wrap this up, I think it's a call to, when we talked before about AI screening tools, those AI screening tools are not going to capture all of the things that we just talked about. So from a hiring manager perspective, it's don't rely on those alone to then bring you up a short list of 5 candidates to go and interview. If people, as we're encouraging people to showcase themselves through different channels as well, and not just rely on the easy, apply, and leave it to go through this filtering process and hope that somebody reaches out to you, to look at ways to engage in other ways and to position yourself and your personal brand in other ways, encouraging both sides to kind of do that and not just rely on a volume-based hiring process. If you're really going to find the people who are going to make the biggest impact for you, or should I say, maximize the chances of finding the people who are going to make the biggest impact for you.
Yeah, undoubtedly. I mean, I think the message I try to leave people with is the market's back.
Yeah,
right. That's great, but as it regains momentum, both job seekers and companies are going to have to adapt. Right. So job seekers need to adopt a more strategic approach to their job search. And I think the road ahead promises growth and transformation and opportunity for anyone who is willing to embrace this change and invest in their skills. And companies, they've got to refine their recruitment practices and they've got to acknowledge their obligations to do so if they still want to attract top talent within a market that's already, moved on from last year and is getting more and more competitive with every passing month.
Yeah. Well, with that, Mark, it's been a fascinating conversation. I always love catching up to hear about the state of play in the recruitment market for procurement. If anybody has listened to this, they'd like to reach out to you, whether they are a hiring manager, whether they are a job seeker, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Sure. So yeah, whether it's a company looking to explore, how to bring new skills into their business, or individuals who are looking to be better seen and heard in the current market and want to talk about resume building or networking or interview tips specific to procurement, right? The best way to reach out is probably via LinkedIn. I'm active on LinkedIn, and we'll be happy to book a meeting with anyone who's looking to have even a more speculative conversation about how we can potentially help. I went into business for myself, well, nearly 11 years ago, and I did it for myriad reasons, but honestly, one of them was to make sure we weren't being put under pressure to try to monetize every single conversation we had with people. So for me, it's about relationship building, and if I can help you today, then I'll be glad to.
Well, that's great. And I can, I've mentioned this in previous podcasts we've done together, but I can attest here. I think we've known each other for probably close to 20 years at this point. It was a long time ago. We first connected over a role that I was looking to interview for, and I always appreciated the conversations and your insight. And I encourage anybody who is listening who falls into one of those groups to reach out directly. What we'll do is we'll put your LinkedIn profile in the show notes for today's episode. Those are just going to be, like all of our episode show notes, will be artofprocurement.com/podcast, and you'll be able to find this conversation with Mark, or just reach out directly to Mark on LinkedIn as well. So until next time, Mark, we'll definitely do this again. I want to thank you for joining me. If this episode struck a chord with you, please do send it to somebody. We grow here at Art of Procurement through word of mouth, and that would be really appreciated. You can also support us by giving us a thumbs up, a star rating, or a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Since 2015, we've built the world's largest free resource for procurement professionals looking to elevate their impact. Our resources span podcasts like this, videos, blog posts, papers, and events. To join us on the inside and to ensure you never miss an episode, a webinar, event, or a post, please do subscribe to our weekly newsletter, This Week in Procurement. You can do that at artofprocurement.com/subscribe. That's artofprocurement.com/subscribe. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.